Irina Viktorovna Gaidamachuk, born 1972, is a Russian serial killer who killed 17 elderly women between 2002 and 2010. Biography: Gaidamachuk was born in the town of Nyegin. At a young age, she became addicted to alcohol. Subsequently, her parents were deprived of parental authority. She moved to Krasnoufimsk in the early 1990s, where she met a man with whom she later had 2 children. Her husband Yuri reportedly refused to provide Gaidamachuk with money for fear that she would spend the money on alcohol. Murders: the majority of Gaidamachuk's crimes were committed in Krasnoufimsk. Similar crimes had been committed in Yekaterinburg, Sarov, Oshit and Druzhnino. Another woman, Irina Valeyeva, was initially suspected for the crimes, and after pressure from authorities, Valeyeva initially confessed to the murders of Gaidamachuk's elderly victims. Court: Gaidamachuk was charged with 17 counts of murders and 1 attempted murder. Forensic psychiatric examination conducted in GNTSSP Serbsky showed that Gaidamachuk, although she showed some variation in the mind, was legally sane. In February 2012, the court case began. Gaidamachuk gave a confession to the indictment during the preliminary investigation, but contested this throughout her trial. On June 12, 2012, Gaidamachuk was sentenced to 20 years in prison. Russian serial killer Irina Gaidamachuk jailed. A court in the Russian city of Yekaterinburg has sent serial killer Irina Gaidamachuk to prison for 20 years. Gaidamachuk, 40, killed 17 elderly women so she could rob them. Gaidamachuk attacked her victims in the Urals region pretending she was a social worker so they let her into their flats. Once inside, she attacked the women with an axe or hammer. The first murder was in 2003 and Gaidamachuk was not detained until June 2010. She confessed. The investigation was troubled by the gender of the perpetrator. The possibility of a female killer was not considered until a woman survived. After the lone survivor's account, police still considered it possible the killer was a man dressed as a woman. Innocent woman Irina Valeyeva was arrested and confessed. More than 3,000 people were questioned before Gaidamachuk was caught. She changed tactic for her final victim, Alexandra Povaritsyna, 81. Opting to pose as a decorator. Police followed up descriptions from neighbors of the bogus tradeswoman. The youngest victim was 61 and the oldest 89. Gaidamachuk was deemed sane. She said her motive was obtaining money for vodka. She must pay expenses for her prosecution. I lived with her for 14 years but never suspected anything, said Gaidamachuk's husband, Yuri. Yuri has since begun a new relationship. Irina has 2 children. Russia's worst woman serial killer dubbed Satan in a skirt after murdering 17 pensioners in 8-year reign of terror. Alcoholic killer Irina Gaidamachuk claimed she carried out her horrific crimes to steal money for vodka. Victims had their skulls smashed in with a hammer or axe by Gaidamachuk, who pretended to be a social worker. Police initially believed only a male killer could be so cruel, but investigation turned on account of sole survivor. June 5, 2012, mother of 2 Irina Gaidamachuk dubbed Satan in a skirt, posed as a social worker to gain entry to the flats of her victims. After securing their trust, the 41-year-old killed them by smashing their skulls with a hammer or an axe. Then she robbed her victims, who were between 61 and 89 years old, for the small amounts of cash in their purses. In all her murders, police say she only gathered a total of around £1,000 from her victims. Sometimes she killed for as little as £20. She confessed to police, "I did it for money. I just wanted to be a normal mom, but I had a craving for drink. My husband Yuri wouldn't give me money for vodka." A court in Yekaterinburg, which is Russia's 4th biggest city, heard evidence from psychiatrists that she was sane when she committed her murders. Only 1 pensioner managed to escape, giving police the vital clue that the granny killer was a woman. A police source said, "We believed at first that only a man could be so cruel as to slaughter in this way." In fact, during a bungled investigation, in which the town of Krasnoufimsk was living in fear, officers also believed the killer could be a man dressed as a woman. They also arrested the wrong woman, Irina Valeyeva, then 29, extracting a confession from an entirely innocent person. After questioning more than 3,000 people, they finally arrested the real killer in 2010. For her final victim, instead of posing as a social worker, she offered to redecorate 81-year-old Alexandra Povaritsyna's flat. After she bludgeoned the pensioner to death, neighbors gave a description of the painter and police arrested her. Gaidamachuk was known as an ordinary mother, who helped out at her younger daughter Anastasia's school. One friend said, "I simply cannot believe Irina is a mass murderer. She was a kind and gentle mother, always eager to help." Her husband Yuri, who has since moved in with a new partner, said, "I lived with her for 14 years but never suspected anything." But there was outrage among her relatives of her elderly victims that the killer was only sentenced to 20 years in prison. One said, "It's little more than 1 year for each murder. She never deserves to be freed." The judge said he exempted her for 5 years of the maximum 25 years because she is a mother. But her lawyer Surin Sarkisian demanded greater leniency, and has vowed to appeal the sentence. Serial killer case hearings start in Yekaterinburg, February 13, 2012. Yekaterinburg City Court has started hearings on the case of 40-year-old Irina Gaidamachuk, who is accused of murdering 17 pensioners. In June 2002, a series of horrifying murders started in the small town of Krasnoufimsk, which later spread to the rest of the Sverdlovsk region. The first victim, an old woman from Krasnoufimsk, died after she got hit on the head by a blunt object. Later, pensioners from other towns were killed in a similar way. Investigators found out that the murderer preferred to number their victims. They wrote number of every victim on the walls of their house entrances. In 2005, investigators believed that the killer was a disguised man. One of the witnesses told them the killer was a woman with blonde hair. Investigators searched for the criminal in various ways, including checking all the blonde women in the region. They even sought the help of psychics, but received no results. Investigators found Irina Gaidamachuk after another murder in May 2010. She was restoring a flat of one of the victims, but had no passport or official job. After a long process of questioning, the woman confessed. Gaidamachuk was tested on psychological problems, but doctors found none. She now faces 25 years in jail, 1.5 years for each victim. This is maximum jail term for women in Russia. Blonde with a hammer killed 17 pensioners over 8 years. January 17, 2012. A female serial killer that brutally murdered 17 pensioners in the Urals has been brought to trial by local police. For over 8 years, 40-year-old single mother Irina Gaidamachuk was attacking old ladies in the Sverdlovsk region. When questioned, the murderer said that she committed the crimes because she did not want to work. As the investigation found out, Gaidamachuk targeted lonely women aged 61 to 89. For several days, she would watch her potential victims to find out when they left home, where they went, and whether the pensioners were visited by any relatives. Having gathered all the information, she knocked on the victim's door, saying she was a social worker. When the victims trustfully let the neatly dressed woman in, the killer knocked them on the head with a hammer, searched their flats and took away whatever money she found. In some cases, the killer attempted to cover her traces by setting the flats on fire, leaving an iron on or opening a gas tap. It was only for the vigilance of the victims' neighbors that all the fires were kept under control. In 2010, after 8 years of brutal murders, a lucky coincidence helped capture the serial killer. At some point, Gaidamachuk decided she would never be caught, and started searching for victims among the people she knew. Investigator Kirill Melenkov told Komsomolskaya Pravda her last victim hired her to make repairs. "That's how we managed to find the killer." She also started leaving notes. "Be home at 11:00, a social worker will visit." A simple handwriting test helped identify the murderer. Investigation continued for 5 years, with police questioning 3,000 witnesses and 21 victims. The officers conducted more than 2,000 forensic examinations. The criminal case against Gaidamachuk consists of 436 charges, and psychiatric tests ruled that she is mentally competent. Satan Iniskirt confesses to 17 murders. A Russian woman dubbed Satan Iniskirt has confessed to murdering 17 female pensioners for cash in a brutal 8-year murder spree. By Andrew Osborne, Telegraph.co.uk, October 29, 2011. Irina Gaidamachuk, a 40-year-old mother of 2, said she had murdered the female ops in the Sverdlov region southeast of Moscow for money, robbing them of sums as little as the equivalent of £20. The detainee has confessed to the murders. Alexandra Shulga, a spokesman for the investigators working on the case, told the Daily Rossiyskaya Gazeta newspaper. The proof of her guilt is that during an investigative experiment she pointed out the exact addresses where the crimes took place and described the situation, including all the details. In addition, Her fingerprints matched the prints left at several murder scenes. Dubbed Satan in a skirt by local media in her hometown of Krasnoufimsk, her killing spree lasted from 2002 until 2010 and reportedly only came to an end after a suspicious neighbor tipped off the police. In each case, she gained entry to her elderly victim's flat using subterfuge before lashing out at their heads with a hammer or an axe. She would then ransack their flats to make it look like a burglary, sometimes even setting a fire, before making off with any cash. Her hauls varied from the equivalent of just £20 to £330. Mrs. Gaidamachuk, who is now waiting to go on trial, apparently told police that she needed the money for her basic living needs as she did not want to work. Her victims varied from the age of 61 to 86 years old. Only one woman, an elderly pensioner called Irina Valeyeva, is said to have survived. She reportedly told police that her would-be killer had posed as a social worker to gain access to her flat. A psychological test showed that Ms. Gaidamachuk was of sound mind.